Oh, hello there. I'm just studying. Remember, homework comes first. Then you can have fun. But I'm about done, so let's just move on to the fun right now. So yeah, I'm back. Third day in a row, third video in a row. It's been pretty fun. With this I'm able to learn more about editing and making videos. But without further ado, let's move on to our predictions, as today we have the Big 12 and the MAC Conference. The Big 12 is fun to look at this year, as not only is it the last year for Texas and Oklahoma, as they're going to the SEC next year, this is also the year where 4 new teams have joined, as BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF are all newcomers. So it's fun to look at this pretty big conference we have here. But with that, let's start with our first team. The first team up is Baylor. Now Baylor was disappointing last year as they were ranked top 10 in the preseason, and they finished 6 and 7. This year I expect a little bit of improvement, but not much. The good thing for them is that they have a lot of their offensive players returning and a fair bit of their defensive players. But their schedule's pretty tough, as they do have Utah and Texas early, and TCU and K-State late in the season. But the middle of this is pretty easy, so I see them getting a good chunk of wins in the middle of the season. And with that and some non-conference games, I think Baylor will go 7 and 5 and get similar to Baylor. BYU is also disappointing, as after beating Baylor, they're ranked 12th in the country, but then they fell apart and finished 8 and 5. This year in the Big 12, I don't see it going too well for them, as their quarterback Jaron Hall is leaving, their running back Chris Brooks is leaving, and their receiver Puka Nacua is gone. With those 3 weapons gone, and them in a new conference, I don't see it going too well for them. It's outside of some of their non-conference games and some pretty weak Big 12 games. I don't see them winning any other games. As for me, I think BYU will go 4 and 8. Cincinnati is going into the Big 12 with a lot of losses, as Luke Fickell went to Wisconsin to take the head coaching job, and similar to BYU, Cincinnati is losing their starting quarterback, their leading rusher and receiver. Again, like BYU with those losses, it's really going to hurt them with them being in a Power 5 conference. So for me, I think Cincinnati will also go 4 and 8, as I think their only wins are going to be non-conference and some of the weak conference games. Houston is the newcomer I see struggling the most in the Big 12, as they're losing their leading receiver, Tank Dell, who had almost 1,400 yards last season. However, I think the big loss for them is their quarterback, Clayton Tune. He was really the only reason Houston was winning games last year, as Houston went a disappointing 8 and 5 after going 12 and 2 the year before. I think with those 2 losses and them in a Power 5 conference, I think they're really going to struggle, as I really think they're only going to win 2 games, so they're going to really struggle in the conference. So for me, I think Houston is going to go 2 and 10. Iowa State last year went 4 and 8, mainly with their offense holding them back, as they actually had a really good defense. However, with some of those defensive players leaving and their top weapon Xavier Hutchinson leaving, there's not a lot of room for improvement in my opinion. Now, with those newcomers in the conference, I think they'll get some wins to make up for it. So for me, I do think they'll finish 4 and 8, but that's just mainly because they have some of those easy conference games. Kansas surprisingly made a bowl game last year, as they hadn't made one since 2008, mainly behind Jalen Daniels, as they started off 5 and 0. And then they got one extra win against Oklahoma State to get that 6th win to get back to bowl eligibility. This year with Jalen Daniels and a lot of other Kansas players returning, I think they're going to improve even more. With a pretty easy non-conference start, I think they'll start really good there. I think they'll start 4 and 0. And then I think they'll do okay in conference play. I don't think they're going to really do amazing, but I think they'll do solid. As for me, I think Kansas will finish 8 and 4. Last year, K-State won the Big 12 championship game and made it to the Sugar Bowl, and they finished 10 and 4. This year they are losing Deuce Vaughn, which is a big loss for them. However, they still have enough talent to still be in consideration for the title game again. Now, the schedule is relatively easy outside of that game against TCU and Texas, so it would be safe to assume they would finish 10 and 2. But for me, I do think K-State will slip up one of those other conference games. So for me, I think K-State's going to go 9 and 3. Oklahoma is looking to rebound after a disappointing 6 and 7 season. With how easy their schedule is this year, I think they definitely can. The 2 big questions for them is, can their defense improve under second-year head coach Brett Venables, and how good would this offense be with their leading rusher Eric Gray and their leading receiver Marvin Mims Jr. gone? It's interesting to see and we'll just see how good Dylan Gabriel really is in this situation. But with their schedule, their only tough games are TCU at the end and their rivalry game against Texas. But just like K-State, I do think they will slip up one game, so I think they'll finish 9-3. Oklahoma State fell apart halfway through the season as they were 6-1 ranked in the top 10, but then they fell apart and finished 7-6. This team is losing a fair bit as they're losing Jason Taylor to the draft and Spencer Sanders and Dominique Richardson to the transfer portal. So it wouldn't look too good for this team. However, their schedule is pretty easy as they have a really easy non-conference schedule, and with 2 winnable games at the end of the season, I think they'll still be bowl eligible, especially since they still have Mike Gundy, who I think will keep this team pretty competitive even with all the talent loss. So for me, I think Oklahoma State will go 7-5. TCU made the national championship last year and finished ranked 2nd in the country. This year, they're starting off ranked 17th with a lot of questions, especially with how much talent they lost, which was a big part of why they got there. However, for me, I still think with Sonny Dykes as head coach and still with a good bit of talent left behind and a weak schedule, I think this team still is going to be a really solid unit in the Big 12. As the only game I really see them outright losing is Texas. They could lose to K-State, but to me, I think they'll beat them. And with every other game looking pretty easy in my opinion, I think that TCU will finish 11-1. Texas is the front runner to win the Big 12 this year, as they have a lot of talent returning as well as a lot of young talent staying at Texas. The big question for them is how big of a loss is Bijan and how much will Quinn Ewers develop and improve. If he doesn't improve and all that much, then Texas will go around 8-4 to 9-3. However, if he improves and all this talent for Texas really steps up, then I think Texas could legitimately be a playoff team. The only loss I see Texas having is to Bama in week 2. But outside of that, I think they can beat K-State and TCU. As a matter of fact, I think they will do it. So for me, I think Texas will finish 11-1. Texas Tech has a lot of momentum coming into the season as they have a lot of talent from last year returning, and they're carrying over a 4-game win streak from last season to end off their 8-5 season. This year, the first part of their schedule is, I think, where I see them getting most of their wins. Outside of that game against Oregon and K-State, most of those games are really winnable, and I think they're definitely an upset potential team. The end of the season is where I really see them struggling though, as at the end they have TCU, Kansas, UCF, and Texas. I think with that end of the season, it's gonna kill a really, really good season for them, but I still think they'll finish 8-4, as with the early stretch, they'll get a lot of those wins there. Of all the newcomers in the Big 12 this year, I think UCF has the best shot to make a bowl game, as they have a lot of talent returning last year from their 9-5 season where they made the American Championship game. The big one being John Rice Plumlee, their quarterback. They do have one big loss as they're losing their starting running back, Isaiah Bowser, to the NFL, but I think with just that one loss, they'll still be a really good team coming over to the Big 12. And as well as their schedule being pretty easy, I definitely see them going somewhere like 7-5, as it's still going to be hard for them to transition and be as good as they were in the American, but I still think they'll be a solid team, and I think they'll make a bowl game in their first year in the Big 12. West Virginia is the last team in the Big 12 we're looking at. For them, they're losing a good bit of talent, which really sucks for them when you consider that their offense was just above average and their defense was pretty bad. But for me, with how easy their schedule is outside of those games against Penn State week 1 and then in the middle of the season against TCU, I see them just being a up and down team. I think they'll just kind of go win, loss, win, loss, win, loss in some sort of cycle. So for me, I think they will nab that 6th win just barely and make a bowl game. So for me, I think West Virginia will go 6-6, and that wraps up my Big 12 predictions. Now, for my conference championship predictions, who I think is going to be the best shot to make the playoffs, and then who are my best possible Heisman candidates from the Big 12. For the conference championship game, I think it's going to be between Texas and TCU. I think those are still the 2 best rosters in the Big 12, and I think Texas is going to improve a lot to get to 11-1, and I think TCU is just going to keep it going from last year with slight regression since they have that one loss. And for me, with Texas's all-around talent, I think that they're going to win that, and with that I think they'll be 12-1, and that makes them my best shot to make the playoffs in the Big 12. Now they're still a young team, so there's a lot of questions, and it's hard to say they'll make the playoffs or not, but if I was to pick a Big 12 team, I would pick them. And for the Heismans, overall, there's not a lot to pick from in the Big 12, but for me, I think it is really down to just to two people, and that is Quinn Ewers from Texas and Jalen Daniels from Kansas. Now, it's interesting to look at them as Jalen Daniels is amazing, but then he got injured halfway through the season, so it's tough to look at him. And then Quinn Ewers, it's all based on if he can develop like people think he does. If he does, then I think he's probably the best shot in the Big 12. But if he doesn't develop, then I think it'll be Jalen Daniels. But that wraps up my Big 12 predictions. We'll move on to the MAC. Now the MAC still has divisions, and we're going to start in the East Division, and our first team there is Akron. Now Akron was one of the worst teams in college football last year as they went 2-10. This year, I honestly think they're going to be worse, as they're losing their leading rusher, Cam Wiley, and their leading receiver, Shaki Jaquez Lewis. With those two losses, it's not going to be any better for them, as the only game I really see them winning is their FCS team, Morgan State. So for Akron, I have them going 1-11. Last year, Bowling Green went 6-7 and made a bowl game. A big part of that was their quarterback, Matt McDonald, who had a pretty good season with 22 touchdowns to 9 picks. Now that he's gone, and with Bowling Green having a pretty tough non-conference schedule and a pretty tough middle of the season, I don't see them making it back to a bowl game. As again, with that tough start in middle of the season, I think they're going to lose all those games early on, and they're not going to be able to claw back. So for me, I think Bowling Green is going to go 3-9. Last year, Buffalo went 6-6 and won their bowl game to make them 7-6. This year, with a lot of that talent returning, I think it's going to be about the same thing. Now, they are losing their leading receiver, Justin Marshall, but he's really the only big part that's leaving for that team. And I think with Buffalo having a pretty easy middle of the season, I think they'll get a lot of those wins in the middle of the season to help climb back from a pretty rough out-of-conference schedule. So for me, I think Buffalo will go 6-6 again and will be bowl eligible again. Last year, Kent State almost made a bowl game, going 5-7. This year, I think they're going to fall off and not get close to a bowl game this year, as they have some big losses, as their quarterback Colin Shield is transferring to UCLA. Their leading rusher, Marquez Cooper, is transferring to Ball State, and their leading receiver, Devontae Walker, is going to North Carolina. With their three best weapons leaving, it's hard to see this team really make any improvements. So for me, I think Kent State's going to go 3-9. Last year, Miami of Ohio made a bowl game going 6-6, mainly on the backs of their defense, which was the best in the MAC. This year, they have a lot of talent all around the field returning. The big loss is that they're losing their linebacker, Ryan McWood, who led their team in tackles. But outside of that, most of the big players on their defense are staying. And with that, I think it's going to help them out a lot, especially when you look at their schedule. The first half of their schedule is really easy. In fact, I think that's going to be where most of their wins come from. With that really good start, I think they're going to carry that over into a pretty tough second half of the season, but I think with that early start, they'll get to a bowl game. So for me, I think Miami of Ohio will go 7-5. Ohio was the only 10-win team in the MAC last year, as they made the conference title game, and although they lost, they did win their bowl game to go 10-4. A big part of that was their offense that ranked first in the MAC. This year, almost that whole offense is returning, and the big part of that is that their quarterback Curtis Rourke is back, their leading rusher Bangora is back, and their leading receiver Wiglutz is back. With those three plus a bunch of other players coming back, this team's going to do about the same. I think they're going to struggle in non-conference play as they're playing San Diego State and FAU on the road, and then they have Iowa State, which is a Power 5 school. But I think after that, I think they're going to win out. I think they're going to win all their conference games. So for me, I think that Ohio is going to go 9-3. Going to our West Division, we have Ball State. Now, the big issue for them is that their leading rusher, Carson Steele, who had 1,500 yards last season, is transferring to UCLA. Now, it looks like a bad problem for them, as he was a big part of their offense and a big reason why they won 5 games. But I do think they'll be fine, as they are replacing him with transfer Marquez Cooper from Kent State, who had 1,300 yards last season, so I think they will be fine. He'll be a good replacement. Now, looking at Ball State's schedule, it is pretty tough, as they do have Georgia and Kentucky weeks 1 and 2. But after that, it's pretty easy from there on out. I think they'll start winning after those 2 games, and I think they'll keep it up and get back to a bowl game. So for me, I think Ball State's going to go 6-6. Last year, Central Michigan went 4-8, and I think this year's going to be about the same. A big issue for them is that they're losing their quarterback Daniel Richardson, they're losing their running back Lou Nicholas, and they're losing their receiver Carlos Carey. With those 3 gone, it's really tough to see this team really improve, and especially with a really difficult non-conference schedule, which includes Michigan and Notre Dame, Michigan State, and also South Alabama, who is a really good Group of 5 team. I just don't see this team really improving too much. I think they'll still be okay in the MAC, but that out-of-conference schedule really kills them. So for me, I think Central Michigan is going to go 4-8 again. Next up, we have Eastern Michigan. Now, they were one of the better teams in the MAC as they went 9-4 with a bowl victory. A big part of that was their offense. That was one of the top-ranked ones in the MAC. They do have a big loss as they are losing their quarterback, Tyler Powell, but I think that they have enough skill position players and enough talent on defense still to do around the same as last year, especially with how easy the non-conference schedule is, because the only tough game on the non-conference schedule is Minnesota, in my opinion. So I think they're going to get a lot of those wins early in the season. Now I think they'll still do fine at the end, but I think the first half of the season will be where they get a lot of those wins. So for me, I think Eastern Michigan's going to slightly improve and go 9-3 in this regular season instead of 8-4 last year. Last year, Northern Illinois went 9 and they were pretty bad in the MAC. This year, I think they're going to get back to a bowl game though, as they have a good bit of talent returning, and while the first half of their schedule is pretty difficult, I think once they get to that Akron game, they'll start winning a lot of games. Those are some of their easiest games on the schedule, and although there's some hard ones like Eastern Michigan, with the MAC always being such a weird conference to look at, I think they can definitely win some of those tough games. So for me, I think Northern Illinois is going to rebound and go 6-6 to make a bowl game. Next, we have our MAC conference champion, Toledo. Last year they went 9-5, and a big part of that was their offense, as they were ranked only slightly behind Ohio. In fact, they beat Ohio in the conference championship game. This year, I think Toledo's going to be the best team in the MAC, and for one big reason. Literally their entire offense is returning. I looked at it. Every single rusher and receiver that had at least 100 yards in that category is returning, as well as their quarterback. With all that offensive talent returning, it really makes this team look dangerous in the MAC, especially with a pretty easy schedule all around. Their only tough non-conference game really is Illinois. Outside of that, I think they might slip up one conference game, but that's it. So for me, I think Toledo is going to go 10-2. The last team in the MAC is Western Michigan. Now last year they almost made a bowl game going 5-7. What held them back was their offense that averaged less than 20 points a game, as their defense was ranked 2nd in the MAC. This year, I think that lackluster offense is really going to hold them back, as a lot of their big defensive players are all gone. They've either on NFL rosters or they went to the transfer portal. With a bunch of that defense talent leaving, I see that defense really falling apart and not being as good as it was last year, where they could still win games for that lackluster offense. So for me, I think Western Michigan is going to go 2-10. I think they can beat one of those pretty bad MAC teams. Like I think they're going to beat Bowling Green last game of the season, and they can win their FCS game. But that's really all I give them with how much defensive talent they're losing. And to wrap up the MAC, who do I think is going to be in the conference championship game, and who do I think is going to win it? I'm not even going to think about the playoffs and a Heisman chance. They have nothing. No Heisman chances, no playoff chances. Even if Bama and everyone else lost 4 games, it'd still put them in over undefeated Toledo probably. So for me, who I think is going to be in the conference championship game, I think it's going to be rematch, Ohio, Toledo. They're going to have the 2 best records, best conference records, and the best rosters, as most of their offensive parts that were the big part of their team's success are returning. And who I think is going to win that, I think it's going to be Toledo again, as Toledo just has more returning talent. Like I said, every 100-yard receiver and rusher is back, as well as their quarterback. I think that's more than Ohio has, which is going to really hurt when they rematch each other. But yeah, that wraps up my MAC predictions, and that wraps up day 3 of the predictions. So I hope y'all enjoyed the Big 12 and MAC predictions. I'll be back here, same time tomorrow, Thursday at 10 Central, for the Pac-12 and Mountain West predictions. I think those are going to be pretty fun in my opinion. I hope y'all enjoy it too. But that wraps up this video. Like, favorite, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And hopefully y'all are back tomorrow for the tailgate. It'll be fun.